Thank everybody for joining Team Florida's June webinar. Today's webinar is going to be recorded and will be online for Team Florida members. Just keep in mind that the Q&A feature, which is located in your Zoom control panel, will be used today for attendees who would like to post questions to their panelists. Those questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We've allotted for about 30 minutes worth of Q&A. And finally, Team Florida will be issuing continuing education credits for our members who have registered and attended today's webinar. So we are excited today. We have FDOT with us. We'll be talking about the emerging mobilities. And let me introduce you today to today's moderator, Brad Thorburn. As the Assistant Secretary for the Strategic Development, Brad oversees statewide transportation planning, modal development, and research for FDOT. He is currently leading the implementation of key elements of the department's vital few mobilities and innovation initiatives. Brad is also leading the implementation of the Florida Transportation Plan and update of the Strategic Intermodal System Plan, or SIS, policy plans. He has more than 25 years of experience specializing in surface transportation and transit planning and public policies. Mr. Thorburn has led a major transportation system overhaul, planning and development of roadway programs, bus rapid transit and commuter rail, and integration of transportation and land use planning. He has an extensive experience developing strategic plans and transportation policies, including approaches, responding to emerging technologies and trends associated with the autonomous and connected vehicles and shared mobility. Prior to joining FDOT, Brad held several key leadership positions, both in public and in private sectors. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Brad. Brad, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Brady. Appreciate Team Florida's hosting us today, and looking forward to this session. Welcome everybody to the Emerging Mobility Summit. As you all know, we're living in the transformation of the transportation industry. Automated, connected, electric, and shared, or ACES, mobility is changing the world as we know it. We hear about new technologies and new buzzwords arrive every day. One of the challenges we face is understanding what's real as opposed to marketing hype. Some of you, most of you are probably familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. So for us, we're trying to assess, are we, where are we past that point of the innovation trigger? Are we somewhere beyond the peak of inflated expectations? Are we wallowing in the trough of disillusionment? Are we hopefully emerging into the slope of enlightenment towards the plateau of productivity? All of this, sort of challenges us as we plan for the future. So this session will hopefully give some insights into what's actually happening in the industry today and what are some of the long-term possibilities. So let's do some reality checks today, and we're going to have some folks to give us a good sense of where we sit. So we have a great series of speakers today. First, you're going to hear from Secretary Thibeault on the Vital Few initiatives and the tie to emerging mobility. Next, Raj Panaluri will provide an update on our CAV program. Jennifer Fortunas will present the electric vehicle master plan, and Carlos Cruz Casas will present on shared mobility projects. I'm going to introduce the speakers in a little more detail as they get ready to present. And at the end, we'll have a panel to discuss and answer questions from you. So we hope you get queued up with your questions. And as you listen, feel free to type questions into the chat box, and that'll get us started as we move into the Q&A. We may have some opportunities for the speakers to actually respond through the chat box as well. So to kick things off, we have a keynote address from FDOT Secretary Kevin Thibeault. I'm fairly certain most of you on this webinar have heard an introductory bio for Secretary Thibeault, so I'm not going to go through the standard. I just want to let you know he has an extensive career in the transportation industry, both in the public and private side, and it includes a distinguished career with the department ranging from project management up through executive leadership. As secretary, he's challenged the department to focus on key areas we refer to as the vital few that include improving safety, enhancing mobility, and inspiring innovation. Secretary Tebow also is passionate about mentorship and building a diverse workforce for the future of Florida's transportation system. And that effort has also been added. The effort to attract and retain talent, or ART, is now also a key element of the vital few. Today, Secretary Tebow is going to start us off by reviewing the vital few and its ties with our discussion on emerging mobility. He is passionate about transportation, and he is challenging all of us to capture the potential of emerging mobility solutions to make our transportation system safer, better connected, and highly efficient. Secretary?
Thanks, Brad. So as a lead-in to your session today on emerging mobility, I wanted to first highlight the department's mission and how we are working to fulfill it. Here at the Florida Department of Transportation, our mission is to provide a safe transportation system that ensures the mobility of people and goods, enhances economic prosperity, and preserves the quality of our environment and our communities. So in order to do this, the department focuses on a core group of elements known as the vital few that are woven into the fabric of the department to move people and goods throughout the state of Florida. So the vital few is a strategic initiative encompassing 4 priority areas essential to FDOT's vision and mission. They are improving safety, enhancing mobility, inspiring innovation, and fostering talent. Last year, department staff from across the state collaborated to develop actionable recommendations in each of these areas. We are now in the process of implementing the recommendations, and as my team will often hear me say, moving the needle. Here are some of the highlights to keep in mind as you discuss emerging mobility. Safety is at the heart of all we do at the department. It is the top priority for FDOT and a vital component in our day-to-day operations. FDOT adopted the Vision Zero target to drive down fatalities. Vision Zero takes a proactive, data-driven, and systems approach. From a data-driven perspective, we have analyzed crash factors and determined that there are 3 main crash types that represent a large portion of the severe injury and fatal crashes. They are lane departures, intersection incidents, and pedestrian bicycle crashes. These 3 areas alone account for almost 3 of every 4 injury crashes in Florida and have become our safety focus areas. We can reduce lane departures by enhancing visibility using technology at high crash locations, strengthening partnerships to improve education and enforcement, and accelerating the adoption of connected and automated vehicles. An important element of improving safety at intersections is gaining public acceptance of innovative approaches like roundabouts. We are enhancing our public engagement process to truly understand individual community needs and visions. We are also adopting a systems approach to solving problems, as opposed to just focusing on isolated intersections. On the technology side, we are updating local maintenance agreements to maintain signals on strategic systems. We know that high speeds along with pedestrians and bicyclists are not a good mix. Higher speeds, especially above 35 miles per hour, greatly increase the likelihood of a fatality in a pedestrian or bicyclist crash. To improve the pedestrian and bicycle safety, we are enhancing crossings, implementing targeted speeds, and incorporating more separated bicycle facilities. The next vital few focus area is enhancing mobility. As you discuss mobility today, it is important to remember that mobility is changing. The needs of our customers are evolving, and they are expecting new and more mobility options. Our team is innovating the future of mobility by focusing on how to move people and goods, not just vehicles. Our residents and visitors are looking for faster, safer, cheaper, and cleaner options than there are available today. FDOT is already one of the most forward-thinking and innovative state DOTs in the country. Still, there is always room for improvement. So we are, 1, enhancing system connectivity with technology and innovation, 2, improving how we support our transit partners. 3, optimizing incident management. And 4, increasing multimodal performance measures. We also need funding flexibility to respond to the changing needs of our customers and the unique needs of the different regions of our diverse state. Partnerships are becoming more and more fundamental to moving people and goods. We will continue developing relationships with local government partners, developers, and forge new partnerships with emerging mobility providers. The department is also undertaking new mobility initiatives. We are discussing a new mobility program to facilitate systemic integrated mobility solutions at a corridor, network, and regional levels. FDOT consistently uses innovative solutions to solve transportation challenges throughout the state and is a leader in transportation across the country. We are embracing innovation in everything we do and are building a strong culture of collaboration and sharing throughout FDOT. The final vital few element is fostering talent. The foundation of FDOT's ability to provide a safe and efficient transportation system for all is our exceptional workforce. It is important that we enhance our practices to attract, retain, and train the best and brightest transportation professionals. As I mentioned earlier, the department is working diligently to implement recommendations to move the needle in each of the vital few elements. And we look forward to working with our industry partners and communities across the state to do this. With that, I'll hand things back over to Brad.
We're going to transition to to do a quick audience poll. So Brady is going to try to set us up here to get a good sense of who's in the audience today. Brady, can we see the poll? There you go. So there are a couple questions here. We want everybody to get a sense of where they who their affiliation is, and then we've got a couple more polls. Are the questions coming up? Brady, I only saw one come up.
Yes, I'm waiting for the first question to be answered, and then we'll move to the next two, Brad. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I thought we were doing them all at once.
Yeah, still a lot of people coming in.
Okay, good. All right. So heavily consultant audience. Good. All right, and we've got obviously got a mix of others in the audience as well. Move to the next question. Discuss your level of familiarity with emerging mobility. All right, we've got a good mix. I think most though are either very or somewhat familiar. Hopefully we can move some folks up into the very familiar range today. And our last question, in your opinion, which has the most potential to transform mobility? All right, so connected was number one, automated a little bit behind, and then shared is in third, and then electric. Interesting. I probably should do this question at the end of the panel too. But all right, so let's move on. And first, I want to introduce our first presenter, which is Dr. Raj Panaluri. Raj is the State Connected Vehicles, Arterials, and Managed Lanes Engineer at FDOT. In addition to leading the state's connected vehicles, arterial management, and managed lane programs, he assists with the development of our TSM&O initiatives. He has over 25 years of experience in traffic engineering and operations, ITS, TSM&O, CAV, and WWD, and public transportation, as well as project management. Raj has, in addition to this, Raj has published works in several journals, and if you are involved in connected and automated vehicles in Florida, you probably know or are aware of Raj. So Raj, why don't you kick us off with connected automated vehicles?
Thank you, Assistant Secretary. I hope you all can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Assistant Secretary, for the great introduction. I really appreciate that. As all of you heard, Secretary Thibault has really laid the excellent foundation for all of us to have an outstanding discussion today. As you've heard him talk about Vital Few, the whole connected and automated vehicle program, about which I'm going to present briefly, is really predicated on the use of emerging technologies for solving safety and mobility concerns, to improve safety, advance mobility, inspire innovation. The first thing I really want to touch on is the automated, connected, electric shared ACES, and you all have responded, and really you said connected is number one, automated is there as well with the other ones too. So yes, it is true that we are living in a highly emerging world today where technologies are here, they're going to be here for a long time. So Florida DOT's ACES website has everything to do with how to communicate the department's vision for safety and mobility, bring all the information together, etc. So we have a project with the University of South Florida, Qatar, where we're cataloging and establishing all the information in one place. In addition to that, the Florida DOT CAV business plan gets into 7 focus areas: policies and governance, because without a good policy, there's not much we can do. And we want to thank FDOT's leadership for fully supporting us with what we're taking up. There's a strong governance mechanism. It is funded extremely well for implementation. We're also working very closely with the industry and for outreach, especially to establish the partnerships. Education and outreach is key. What I'm doing now is partly sharing information with you and having an outreach, essentially. We can do all the big things, but we need strong technical standards and specifications. And at the end of the day, it is all about implementation and deployment. We'll go to the next slide. So FDOT is very focused on implementation and deployment going forward. And what you see on the left-hand side of this slide is Florida DOT's CAV website, the Connected and Automated Vehicle Initiative website. All you have to do is Google FDOT space connected vehicles, or you can click this link. You'll see a total of 33 initiatives. 28 of them are led by the Florida Department of Transportation, along with the V2X data exchange platform, security credential management system, the I-75 frame, I-4 frame. I can go on and on, but there's numerous initiatives. We also show the partnering entities, the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority's THEA project, the Voyage at the Villages type of projects, which are all shown on this page. We suggest you visit this site. You will see a lot of great detail. I can assure you this particular website is constantly updated. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing here is a roadmap. We have a very clearly defined roadmap, which should lead towards what the Secretary has stated. We'll go to the next slide. It is all about initiating good projects, early implementation, learning the lessons, creating a roadmap, and deploying projects that give results. 2 such projects are stated here. The SCMS, the Security Credential Management System, which I touched on earlier a few seconds ago, is all about making sure that the connected vehicles or devices that are out there, whether it is the roadside units, the onboard units, connectivity to traffic management centers, traffic signal controllers, all these aspects have a security layer built into them through the SCMS. We've deployed it. Florida is one of the first states in the country to do it. It's been in operation for a year, and we are pleased that the equipment vendors like this program as well. We also have the V2X data exchange platform, which is a major undertaking, and Florida is becoming a leader in this area because we can get all the data we want, but at the end of the day, using those data to make decisions is important. We'll go to the next slide. So the V2X data exchange platform is all about collecting the data, analyzing the data, and sharing the information with the car companies and others for making decisions. Ready? We'll go to the next slide. So here you see what is called a typical deployment project. We are very focused on results. In other words, if we take up a project, there got to be a good result at the end of the day. The idea behind this is to make sure that whatever gets implemented, we learn the lessons very quickly and we scale it up or we move on. We apply artificial intelligence. We have a lot of research projects with vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian type of opportunities. University of Florida is working on an artificial intelligence machine learning project. What you see on the right-hand side of this slide has everything to do with applying the lessons from artificial intelligence and machine learning to solve some real problems at traffic signals, real opportunities, I would say, at traffic signals and other locations. We'll go to the next slide. Ready? Micromobility is a major area. You visit any university campus, you see many modes, right? It is just not the vehicles. It is emergency vehicles. It is transit, bicycles, pedestrians, scooters, skateboards. There's many, many modes that are constantly in motion in a highly urbanized environment at university campuses or campi, etc. The goal of the Connected Vehicle Program is to detect pedestrians in a passive mode, for instance, know where the vehicles are moving, and also provide information to the vehicles well in advance of them approaching, like a semi-block crosswalk. So promoting safety of pedestrians, promoting the safety of bicyclists, promoting the safety of all of the users, transit signal priority, freight signal priority. I can go on and on, but the focus is really on multimodalism. We'll go to the next slide. So with that said, at the end of the day, it boils down to partnerships. Without partnerships, there's not a lot of progress we can make. Whether you look at the I-75 frame project in districts 2 and 5, or whether you look at the I-4 frame project that is being developed in districts 1, 5, 7, and the Turnpike, or the V2X data exchange platform, which we are getting ready to deploy for statewide, the focus on transit, example project in District 4 that is being developed, transit projects all over the state, freight project being developed in District 4, bicycle pedestrian projects in Gainesville, the I-Street test bed with University of Florida, the CARMA relationship with the Federal Highway Administration, and most importantly, the technology applications partnership with local agencies, as the Secretary has highlighted. These are key things for us going forward. So partnerships are here. We need those partnerships with the industry, and we encourage anyone who wants to work with FDOT in a safety and mobility realm. We request you to let us know, and we want to partner with you. We go to the next slide, Brady. So here we want to talk about partnerships not only with the University of Florida and local agencies, but we also want to get into opportunities with equipment manufacturers. So Brady, we'll go to the next slide. In this slide, what you see is two particular things, near-miss identification safety system and its application. We do have a project called the NMIS, or the near-miss identification safety system. It is being implemented in 3 particular entities in the state of Florida, in the city of Lakeland, in Seminole County in Central Florida, and West Palm. This work is being undertaken at 26 signalized intersections to collect both historical and real-time data. The whole idea behind this is to know well ahead of time of situations where a crash could happen. Harsh braking is one example. If there's too many harsh braking activities, and if they occur pretty repetitively, it is always important to know why they are occurring. Could it be signal timing related? Could it be geometry? Could it be a need for a right turn lane? There should be some underlying reasons why these near miss events happen. So even before traffic crashes happen, we want to catch them. So that's what this project is all about. And we can provide you more detail as the project evolves. We'll go to the next slide. This next slide really talks about what are called the frame projects. We'll go to the next slide, Brady. This is what I was mentioning earlier, the I-75 frame project and the I-4 frame project on freeway systems. They get into integrated code management, they get into advanced signal systems, they get into queue warning, speed harmonization type of detail, which we know will promote not only safety, but also mobility or vice versa. Here's the last slide. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide, Brady. Here's the last slide, the SunTrax test facility If you are not aware of SunTrax, we request you to know more. You can just visit the website suntraxfl.com, and you should be able to see the details about what's happening on the test facility. Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, who's building this facility, is expected to look into testing for tolls, testing technologies for signalized intersections, for freeway systems and whatnot. The idea behind this is to provide an opportunity for the industry to come work very closely with us and also with our research universities. With that, I want to thank you for your time, this presentation, and I now will turn it back to our Assistant Secretary, Mr. Brad Colbert. Assistant Secretary, to you, sir.
Thanks, Raj. It's great to hear of all the exciting things you got, and a number of our partners are working on. So it's certainly an exciting time, and good to see kind of where we stand with some of those projects. Our next presenter is Jennifer Fortunis. Jennifer manages our forecasting and trends office, which is the trusted source for transportation system performance in Florida. FTO is responsible for transportation forecasting, modeling, performance trends, customer satisfaction surveys, and demographic analysis. Some of the products FTO provides its customers include the digital sourcebook, the Florida statewide model task force, and the survey colloquium. Prior to joining the department, before joining FTO, Jennifer worked for 3 years as a state managed lanes engineer, and 10 years in systems planning, and 10 years in private consulting doing roadway design, project development, and environmental and transportation planning. Jennifer's also a star of the Team Florida podcast series. Jennifer?
Thank you, Brad. Good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here to discuss the electric vehicle infrastructure master plan. Section 339.287 of the Florida statute requires FDOT, in consultation with the Public Service Commission and other state agencies, to coordinate, develop, and recommend a master plan for electric vehicle charging infrastructure along our state highway system. The objectives of this plan include support short-range and long-range electric vehicle travel, as well as emergency evacuation, adapt our transportation infrastructure to be consistent with electric mobility trends, and to ensure the availability of adequate and reliable electric vehicle charging stations. To ensure the availability of adequate and reliable charging stations, a gap analysis was performed to identify potential new locations for such stations. The green dots on this map provide a starting place or footprint for evaluating site-specific considerations such as power supply, amenities, land use, and available on-site space. The plan to build out the EV charging network will occur in phases over the next 15 to 20 years as the EV adoption rate increases. First, the gaps will be filled using a 40-mile spacing between direct current fast charge locations along our state highway system, and providing at least 2 charging stations at each location. Then we will grow and densify the network by increasing the number of chargers at each location to at least 6. Finally, we'll continue to densify and maintain the network by decreasing the distance between the charging stations to 25 miles and increasing the number of chargers at each location where needed. Florida's current EV adoption rate is 0.41% of light-duty vehicles, estimated using anonymous and aggregated vehicle registration data. 3 growth scenarios have been developed as indicators for understanding how aggressively to adapt our transportation infrastructure. Under the aggressive scenario, EV ownership could be as high as 35% in 2040. This may shift and evolve with certain industry milestones, like 2025, when Volvo has pledged that 50% of its vehicle offerings will be electric, and 2030, when 40% of Ford's global sales will be electric, and 2030, when GM proposes all passenger vehicle and SUVs to be electric. The Public Service Commission is exploring different models of appropriate regulatory structure for the utilities based on certain site-specific circumstances and flexibility. Initial observations among the stakeholders showed consensus that Florida's current regulatory structure is appropriate for the delivery of electricity to the charging station infrastructure. Participation by public utilities in this EV charging marketplace involves two areas of consideration. First, the interaction with the third-party electric vehicle service providers. Second, the utility-owned and operated electric vehicle supply equipment. Florida electric utilities have begun evaluating their involvement with implementation of various pilot programs. All motor fuel consumption-based revenue for transportation will be reduced as more and more electric vehicles hit the road. This will have national, state, regional, and local impacts. The moderate growth scenario here shows that for every 1% increase in EV market adoption, there could be a 0.5% reduction in state transportation trust fund revenue. This is not limited to just the state level. The local option fuels tax will also be impacted, reducing available resources to operate and maintain local roadways as well as public transportation. The recommendations of this plan include a 4-level framework with goals, initiatives, objectives, and strategies. The main organizing factors are the initiatives: adapt, facilitate, educate, and coordinate. FDOT should take the lead in adapting its existing transportation infrastructure to support electrified mobility. Some objectives include monitoring the market and industry trends, adapting the transportation policy framework, and expanding our electric vehicle supply equipment network along our state transportation system. FDOT can serve as a facilitator between public and private partnerships to strategically enhance electric vehicle infrastructure by forging those partnerships to expand our electric vehicle supply equipment network. We can identify a variety of partner funding opportunities and promote the installation of community charging infrastructure. Public awareness and education of electric transportation infrastructure and how it supports electrified mobility is important to achieving the goals of this plan. The local jurisdictions and agencies need practical guidance for planning of EV charging infrastructure installation. The MPOs need guidance for including electric vehicle charging equipment and equity in the development of their long-range transportation plans. Publicly available electric vehicle charging infrastructure can be promoted through signage, websites, social media, as well as the Florida 511 application. FDOT should continue coordinating with all stakeholders to advance a regional approach to electric vehicle infrastructure, support electric vehicle supply equipment planning and implementation efforts, and establish state, regional, and local agency roles and responsibilities. Equity is incorporated into the recommended action items to achieve the overarching goals of this plan. Equity prioritizes fair and equal access and incorporates criteria for mitigating potential social and economic status barriers to electric vehicles and charging stations. The department is committed to advancing electrified mobility in the state through the implementation of the Electric Vehicle Master Plan. Recommendations from this plan will guide the development of integrated mobility solutions, reflecting the diverse needs of our state. The innovative electrified mobility solutions will serve Florida for years to come as the department continues to deliver one of the best transportation systems in the nation. The next steps include submitting the final plan to the governor's office July 1, 2021, and subsequently initiating implementation activities. The draft plan is available on the website here, and if you have any general questions, please email the project email listed here on this slide. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jennifer. And you and Ed Hutchinson have done tremendous work on the EV master plan. Really good stuff. When we are able to post the final version, I strongly encourage folks to take a look at it. It's really a great resource document and helps kind of put that roadmap out there that will help guide us moving forward. So great work and appreciate it. The lastly, but certainly not least, is Carlos Cruz Casas. And Carlos, I've enjoyed getting to know Carlos over the time I've been at the department. And obviously I have a fond interest in the things that transit agencies are trying to do and experimenting with emerging mobility solutions and how they fit into their transit network. So Carlos is with the Miami-Dade County Department of Transportation and Public Works. His primary focus is to introduce mobility innovation and plan for a fully integrated transportation system. His career includes both public and private sector experience, ranging from conceptual design to implementation of pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and traffic project. As a professional engineer dedicated to the development of livable transportation, Carlos seeks to achieve the right balance between mobility and livability. Carlos now serves as a board member for the Open Mobility Foundation and the TRB's Mobility Management Committee. Carlos, you're up.
Excellent. Thank you. What a great conversation so far. So let's see if I can keep it up. Like Brad mentioned, I'm currently an assistant director of the Department of Transportation and Public Works for Miami-Dade County. And I know what you guys are thinking, man, that's just too long of a title. And you're right, and perhaps it doesn't do even justice to what we do. I like to consider Miami-Dade County Department of Transportation as a mobility management agency, as we manage and operate all traffic control devices, traffic engineering, highway engineering, signals and signs, bicycles and pedestrians, transit planning, transit operations, and even the regulatory arm for for-hire vehicles, taxis and limos, and before Ubers and Lyft. So if you think about it, it's all mobility in Miami-Dade County. And like I mentioned earlier, my role is to bring mobility innovation into our community. While often innovation is confused with technology, to us is about how we address the problems that we have in hand. Next slide. But before we can talk about mobility, one of the first things we need to do is to understand what it is. For most of us, transportation professionals, mobility is a bus, is a rail, is bike lanes, and perhaps the scooters that you see around. But for everyone else, it is, yes, the same bus and rail, bike lanes, but also everything else. It's also about going to the office, to the grocery store, to a concert, or perhaps just go and have dinner with your friends. And we started thinking about how to address this from a not only transportation provision point of view, but more about the facilitation of trips and our role in making that in that arena. Next slide. And we started to think about this a couple of years ago in collaboration with major cities across the nation. Hosted by the Transportation for America, the Smart Cities Collaborative was focused on elements like autonomous vehicles, big data, and on-demand transit. And alongside with LA, Seattle, we decided to tackle the on-demand transit. That was back in the day, and I'm not sure you guys remember, when TNCs or TNEs, we used to call here in the state, the transportation network entities like Ubers and Lyft, were coming in and into our cities, and rather than us thinking about what they're taking away from us, we wanted to focus on what they are teaching us. They were teaching us that people were really value their transportation where they need it and when they need it. And that's what the idea for us to start changing the way we deliver public transportation came in. Next slide. Transit 2.0, if you will. We went through a procurement to identify what's the best way for us to evolve public transportation from a fixed route service to an on-demand service. I'm going to go in detail now, and we wanted to make sure that we did it right from the start. So we did a procurement with our partner is Via Transportation, who you might hear about of many successful projects across the nation, and it was a full turnkey solution that they provide the vehicle, the technology, the operators, and all the support to make it happen. Next slide. And as you can imagine, some of the items on the this Go Connect program that we launched with VIA is very similar to Uber and Lyft. It is app-based. The users have to create an account. They add the method of payment and they can add the preferences. Next slide. However, there's going to be some coincidence, of course, in the way that the experience of the user is. The user requests a ride, it get assigned with to a match with a driver, and then meet the driver on the street and share a ride with the potential user. But there is a slight difference from our on-demand program with Go Connect and the typical TNC, and is that we have built a geofence area that can allow us to have a dedicated fleet for this service. In addition, when the user is riding, they add the origin and destination, typically the same way that a TNC, and they get matched to a ride. In our case, most likely the user is going to be asked to walk to a meetup point. This is a way for us to maximize the use of the resources and make sure that this particular program is aligning with our goals, that we are trying to provide a near door-to-door service that is better for the community as a whole. And that's one of the things that I like most about the on-demand program, which is allows to be fully customizable. So if your preferences you identify and that you cannot walk far and that you need assistance, that vehicle will be dispatched directly to the front door. Our first area, next slide, Brady. Our first deployment is on the southern end on the heavy rail system. If you're familiar with Miami-Dade County, on the Dayland North and Dayland South stations is our southern end on the heavy rail. We carry more than 20% of the ridership pre-COVID, of course, in those two stations. And we had half a dozen, basically, or more regional transit services with buses and regional buses around. And these two stations combined, they had 3,300 parking spaces that unfortunately, and I guess, or fortunately, they will be full by 8 in the morning. So we were limiting the demand on transit, if you will. And I'm talking about massive structures, 11 stories high parking garages that people were utilizing. We did a quick data analysis on it. We identified that more than 500 monthly pass holders were living within a mile or two of these two stations, and they were registered to park. So that for us, it was this captive audience that we can start looking at potentially transforming and move them into on-demand service and open up those parking spaces for someone that's coming from a little further out. Next slide. And we started looking on how we can provide this service in complementary with the fixed route. This is a quick detail on the heat map on the service diagonal line that you see in this particular slide provides an indication of the heavy rail system, and we have a heat map about origin destination. So this is truly acting as a complement to the fixed route service that we have to provide better access to the heavy rail system. And today we do have a true multimodal trip planning solution with this. If you go to the Go Connect application today and request a trip from, let's say, downtown Dayland, which is walking distance from Dayland South Station, and you want to go to Sunset Place to a restaurant on Sunset Place, which is walking distance to South Miami Station, the system will not going to send you a car. It's actually going to give you the directions to a transit trip and allow you to do that in real time. And next slide. And learning from that ability for us to not only trying to get people to transit, but also trying to get transit information out there as more open as possible, we now have real-time information available in the Go Miami-Dade app, in the Go Connect, in Move It, Transit, Lyft, Apple, Google Maps, and Uber. A lot more people are really using our real-time information on it. Next slide. Another successful deployment that we had here in Miami-Dade County was during COVID. We successfully launched a Go Nightly program, which was in an attempt for us to still provide transportation services to essential employees. During COVID and the restrictions, we eliminated all the overnight routes that you see here in blue covering our county. But we didn't want to train people away from transit. So instead of eliminating the service, we actually provided a voucher program to make sure that people can move efficiently. And if you think about that, that's part of our role, is making sure that people can complete their trip. Next slide, Brady, please. And that can not only be limited to just overnight service. This is an example when we looked at micro mobility data on the left and transit data on the side. This is nothing but a blank map with the lines or the trips taken on both these particular solutions. If you start looking at it, there is different need, whether it's the first mile, the last mile, or the complete trip. Our role should be to provide the tools for people to be able to successfully take the trip. And in the moving forward for us, the opportunity is to start making this a reality, not only in our experience, but everything out there. Next slide, Brady. And what we're trying to build here is an acknowledgement first that we're not the only transportation provider in our community, nor should we be the only ones. There is many other players around, and that there is a particular solution that can be appropriated and provided for the users. And for us is how can we open and make sure that everyone has our information in the most accurate way to create a truly mobility marketplace, so the user is comfortably informed about the solutions that are available to them and making the right decision in order for that particular trip. You're trying to make sure that multimodal and intermodal trips are truly a reality for our community. We're building the back office for all this. We're already created open payment solutions and open payment integration for third-party mobility solutions. So now, instead of trying to become this mobility as a service provider, our goal is to make sure that our information becomes universal, so that way that we can meet the user and where they are. And my last slide, Brady, if you please. Want to talk about what's next. I think there is a lot of lessons learned, what we've done here in Miami-Dade County, from the Gold Nightly program that we have launched. And like I mentioned, now that successfully overnight, we're looking at how we can implement this type of solution during the daytime. And if we can do this with 4 wheels, our goal is that we can also do this with micromobility devices in 2 wheels. Electric bicycles are becoming a good part of our mobility ecosystem. We want to leverage that. We want to push as far as we can. We are going to be exploring some other opportunities for the micromobility, universal docking stations. So we don't pick winners and losers. We just allow for a proper allocation of space for the micromobility devices in the public right of way and create a better solution for the users. We have partnered before with Waze to do a dynamic carpool integration, and we want to continue to start looking at that. So to me, I'm really enthusiastic about not only being able to try these things out, but understand that the benefit that they bring to our community and work together with our partners like the Florida Department of Transportation, like the Transportation Planning Organization here in South Florida, and the 34 municipalities to make sure that we have a comprehensive mobility ecosystem that can meet the needs and goals of our community. With that said, I'm looking forward, Brad, to the conversation. I learned so much today, and I'm looking to see how we can continue this.
Great stuff, Carlos. I'm really impressed by the work you're doing. And I know, we strategically wanted to have one of our partners focusing on the shared mobility, because it really is happening at that level with the transit agencies, and you're on the front edge of that. I know a number of our transit partners are also working in this area, and we all need to share our experiences. And I would really love the message of, that approach of you're trying to expand the mobility marketplace or create a mobility ecosystem where transit's part of it. And I think sometimes we can maybe get a little caught up on, well, I got to connect these things, and it's helpful if they're connected. But if we really expand that mobility marketplace, make it easier for people to get around, transit's going to be part of that solution. And so I love the approach you guys have. So with that, we've heard on CAV from Raj. Jen gave us exciting status of the EV master plan, which I know is capturing a lot of attention these days. And then Carlos with shared mobility. So we've got a good kind of view of the ACES spectrum. And now we're going to move into Q&A. And we really, the panelists made a concerted effort to move through pretty quickly, so we had time to have this conversation. And so I really hope folks will put some questions in. I've got a couple in the queue already, but strongly encourage you to offer some questions. Now, the first one I see that's come up is the question that we tend to get often, which is, how are we going to pay for transportation when everybody's driving electric vehicles? And Jennifer, I'm going to spare you on this one. I mean, you can weigh in, but we get this question a lot. It's a really important question, and we've grappled with it too at the department because really there's a conversation happening, a policy conversation happening at a lot of different levels, and there are a handful of pilots in other states that we will do sessions with our transportation partners in other states through AASHTO, whatever, and really there's so many pilots going on right now that we actually see the value of kind of sitting back and watching and learning from them, because there is a lot happening, and there's policy conversations happening about electric vehicle charge, obviously road usage charges out there. There are a lot of questions about how you do it, and there's some equity questions and so forth. So there's a lot of policy questions to talk about, and so that's happening. And I think as we've seen the emergence of the OEMs really pushing electric vehicles, it's forced that conversation to move forward. And so you're going to see it at the state level, you're going to see it at the federal level, and you're going to see it at the local level, because as Jennifer mentioned, it impacts local revenue sources as well. So an important conversation, not necessarily an answer that's definitive, but it's on everybody's mind right now. So I've got a couple questions that I have but I'm seeing some good questions coming up in here. Although it looks like Shanda, you've answered a couple for me, so I need to make sure. Okay, so got one. As a member of Team Florida, how do we see the Expressway authorities playing a role in ACES and CAV initiative? And Brady, you may even want to weigh in on that. I'm not sure.
Can we take that?
Yeah, Rod, why don't you
Sure.
take it from the CAV standpoint, because I know you've got some partners working in that area for sure.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you, Assistant Secretary. Great question, Javier. In fact, the ACES project, which we are dealing with at the Florida Department of Transportation, is being led by USF Qatar, University of South Florida Qatar, and they are actively engaging with multiple entities, cutting across the universities, the public agencies, the local agencies, I should say, with the consultant team members, Autonomous Florida, Florida Chamber of Commerce, etc. What I will do is I'll take a homework assignment after this call, and that is to make sure the ACES program being led by FDOT is not going to leave anyone without having been touched, including Expressway Authority. So, but to the larger question, I think overall, whether it's the ACES or the CAV, clearly Expressway authorities have a huge role to play. Florida Turnpike Enterprise, which is in a way an Expressway authority, is playing a great role too. CFX, MDX, doesn't matter who, Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. It is important we start testing these technologies and deploy them, because there is definitely a toll angle to this whole thing, including managed lanes efforts. So great point, and we'll take it forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when we talk about ACES holistically, obviously on the electric side, the Turnpike's been a partner as well. So Jennifer, we've been working with the Turnpike in terms of opportunities for electric charging. So question here is, with the increased focus on new mobility options, do you see the proportion of funding to transit complete streets and technology deployments increasing relative to traditional roadway expansion projects? This is a great question, and I think what we have really focused on within the department is the idea that each area is a little different, and that we're seeing priorities driven locally, and that our program responds accordingly. So clearly the issues that Carlos and Miami-Dade are dealing with are very different from the Panhandle or even Jacksonville or Tampa or Orlando. They're all very distinct and different. And that, so we've had a focus, and I think that, the Secretary mentioned flexibility in our funding. We look at CIS policy, things like that. what are the funding priorities and how do we respond to local needs? So that's something that I think you're going to continue to see. I don't know if anybody on the panel has any additional thoughts on that. It's sort of a high level policy question. So.
Since, Raj, I know you were wanting to answer first, so please go ahead. Okay, so yeah, so to me, that's what I always start, some of my conversation about the role that we play, right? We're custodians of the public right away, and we're becoming mobility management agency. To our role is really to make sure we facilitate the trips, right? And I think if you heard back the presentation from the secretary earlier today, it talks about the other elements of safety in the public right away. So we cannot continue to talk about micromobility, bicycles and scooters in our street, access to transit stations, bus stops, if we don't talk about the appropriate space there. So complete streets, better access to transits are vital in this conversation. Vision Zero, it is definitely an idea that can help us achieve that. So for our point of view, the answer is yes. From our point of view, we're already doing projects. We're taking away some lane and converting into protected bike lanes in downtown Miami under construction right now. And we're moving forward to do some lane width diet in order to keep the throughput for the vehicle, but then reduce the speed. And then we'll start looking in not only transit, but what is the new definition of transit? And for us is how can we move people more efficiently? In sometimes will be directly better transit system. We're doing a bus network redesign and we have the smart plan. Sometimes will be a voucher program with an Uber and a Lyft, with a scooter, with a bicycle. We're looking to identify solutions out there that can provide better, that can solve the needs of the user. And there's already happening here in Miami-Dade County.
And Raj, on your end, I mean, a lot of the investments we're focused on are improving throughput of our facilities too. So I don't know if you want to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, Assistant Secretary. In fact, it's interesting the topic of complete streets came up because just the other day when we were having a conversation internally with our leadership, we're looking at context sensitive aspects. We're looking at complete streets. How can technology play a role in a complete street scenario? Because as all of us know, when it comes to land use planning in particular, when we talk about urban sprawl, mobility as a service for that matter, ride sharing, etc., clearly technologies have a huge role to play. Sidewalks, bike lanes, transit lanes, bus lanes, median islands, pedestrian signals. So there's clearly a lot of things happening in a complete streets context sensitive environment. And clearly technology has a role to play, not only with mobility, but also safety aspects. And to the Assistant Secretary's point, Florida has a comprehensive program called TAPS LA, which stands for Technology Applications Partnership with Local Agencies. Our districts lead this work. It's a $10 million initiative. We have projects that are coming up so that local agencies can work with FDOT and vice versa, so that we can promote a seamless service to all the road users, both from a safety and mobility standpoint. And that includes multimodalism, transit, freight, bike pads, vulnerable road users, micromobility. I can go on and on, but yes, parking is another big area too. How can we provide information to motorists even well before they arrive at large parking locations, for instance? So yes, technology is here and it's for multimodal use and for safety and mobility for all road users. Back to you, Assistant Secretary.
Great, thanks, Raj. I got a question on in-road, this dynamic or I guess inductive charging, could this be an opportunity in the future to reduce the need for EV charging stations? So Jennifer, I think you guys looked at innovative future opportunities. You want to handle that one?
Sure thing. Certainly, the department will support. Right now, the technology is still in the research and testing phase. So this is a great opportunity to leverage our Tracks test facility and to do some testing of this next generation wireless power transfer charging. And this would, if they can get it to be cost effective and scale it up, this would definitely help with the charging infrastructure, filling in the gaps.
Super. So this is a question for everybody. How do we, when it comes to connected and automated vehicles and shared mobility, how does Florida stack up? Now the question is specific to CAV. So Raj, you probably have some good insights there, but Carlos may have some insights in terms of what he sees in other states and other transit agencies in terms of moving the needle, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Assistant Secretary. I'll be quick because I know we have contributions from others too. I'll be honest in saying that Florida is a leader. There is no question about that. You can look around the nation, you can pretty much go to any state you can think of. In fact, at the Florida Department of Transportation, we are one of the few states one of the many states in the country to be on what is called the Connected Vehicle Pool Fund study. We serve on ITS America, we serve at the Transportation Research Board. No matter which forum you go to and look around, Florida is a leader. The FAV Summit, the Florida Automated Vehicle Summit, is one of its first kind ever in the nation. And when you go to any of those meetings, you'll see the number of people who come to those calls, right? To come to those meetings, and that itself is an indicator. We just don't talk about it, right? We developed a comprehensive business plan. We are in the business of implementation. We are in the business of learning lessons. We are scaling up as necessary. We're implementing technologies. We're looking at cybersecurity. We're talking at signal phasing and timing projects. We created the frame projects of Florida's regional advanced mobility elements, as a result of which recently Federal Highway granted the $10.6 million award for the I-4 frame. I think the list is kind of, I don't want to say endless, but certainly a long one. We are looking at multimodalism, AV shuttles. We are looking at numerous safety and mobility applications, both on freeways and arterials. So Florida is definitely a leader, and Florida gets called upon to serve on many national panels just because we are a leader at the front. And our leadership is highly supportive of everything we do, and there's no way we'll be where we are without the leadership support. So I think we're in a great place, no matter which way you look at it here in Florida.
Carlos, what do you see on the shared mobility marketplace? And
Yeah, the same. I've been involved in this for quite some time. And just a quick example that I can give you, the TRB, the Transportation Research Board, alongside with the National Academies of Science, just released basically a report that talks about the role of the public sector in this new mobility ecosystem with all the different things, mobility as a service, emerging mobility. And out of the 12 members, there were 2 represented from the state of Florida. From here, Brad Miller and myself were sitting on this particular round table, and both from the public sector transit agencies. The West Coast has been the pioneer on introducing, West Coast of Florida, of course, in the Pinellas County and the Tampa area, the pioneers are introducing this partnership with Ubers and Lyft and TNCs with transit agencies for years, and that is something that everyone knows. Now we're scaling up to more shared mobility solutions, and I hear from all these companies that want to come to Florida, not only because of the good environment that we have, not only because of a good regulatory framework that allows for these things to happen, but more is for the eagerness of the local entities wanting to innovate, to provide better service to the community.
good stuff. One of the things that we're hearing a lot about these days is the question of equity. And I'm kind of curious how each of you sees equity playing in connected, automated, in the ACEs generally. I mean, I think, clearly, like Carlos, you guys have to deal with issues about, who's got access to a phone and can actually, or has a bank account that can actually access these services. Are there ways to address that? Electric and connected and automated all have different issues as well. You want to talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, I think, one of the first things we need to make sure is when we introduce new technologies, we're not making bigger this digital gap that exists sometimes. So yes, even though it is, let's talk about the Go Connect program, we do have a way for users to be able to create an account and basically be able to request a trip by a phone number, right? And being able to use, if they don't have the application to be paid, they don't have a credit card, they don't have the open payment system, they can use our transit card to pay for these type of solutions. And that is, to me, is a way for us to bring some of these equitable approaches to it. Not only that, but we introduce fare capping. So basically now we're trying to make sure that no matter how many trips you take in one day, if you just pay what you need at the moment, you can continue to add to make sure you don't end up paying more than someone that might have the ability to pay $112 up front on the month for a monthly pass. On the Go Nightly program, the same thing. We wanted to make sure that it was at night, it was already during emergency situation, our essential employees were out there. So we wanted to make sure that someone could dial a number and get a ride. So we partnered with Uber and the Uber Central. We were the calling center to dispatch the Uber through a phone number. And even if you needed a wheelchair accessible vehicle, we partnered with our paratransit provider to have them provide the service. So for us, this is always going to be at the forefront of the things that we do. And I do appreciate the effort that we're doing. And I'll put this in probably on Raj, something that I saw and noticed or video from Waymo in the Phoenix area, someone that was basically some visual impairment that now has freedom because now can actually request a car through a shared automated and connected vehicles in the Arizona area. So I think it's phenomenal. The sky's the limit with all the things we'll be able to do. And if anything, we're going to make things more basically plain living field for everyone.
Yeah, great stuff. Raj or Jennifer, you had some thoughts there?
Yeah, from the electric vehicle perspective, a couple of things that we're exploring is, in the urban areas where there's more congestion and probably more electric vehicles, those are very attractive for charging infrastructure to be installed. So one of the things we can do is, as we're filling in those gaps in the more rural areas to make sure we can promote those long distance trips, we can make sure that we're doing it in a way that addresses the equity. Another option that we're looking at is in those urban areas, helping with getting charging infrastructure in the condos or the multifamily dwelling units, places where, even though 80% of the charging is done at home, we want to make sure we're including those who don't have a garage to set up their charging port. And so make sure that there's tons of charging available at those places and a lot of community charging. So if there is publicly available community charging at different locations like supermarkets, movie theaters, that kind of thing, then we're making sure that everybody has access to the charging infrastructure.
That's great. So what do you, well, I guess a sort of a high level question here is what do you see as kind of the biggest challenges that we face in the ACES spectrum here, and also in the context of I talked a little bit earlier about the hype cycle, kind of where you see us. Are we, it's interesting on the EVs. It's almost like I can't tell because I feel like we might have been in the trough of disillusionment for like the last 15 years or so, and now are we emerging? Are we going back up into the peak of unrealistic inflated expectations? Jennifer, what do you think?
I wonder because, there's been a lot of announcements recently, all the automakers, and this is sort of the category or flavor of the month, like electric vehicles are going to just saturate our vehicle fleets in the next 5 to 10 years. I think in reality, it's going to, be a proportion of our fleet. And what is going to happen that will be good for everyone is the conversations about how to fund transportation will continue to happen. And EVs are sort of dipping the toe into the water for that conversation, but it's a conversation that is difficult, but has to be had. And so I think that is going to be one of the positive outcomes of that. So.
Yeah,
my 2 cents.
I may add, Assistant Secretary. So you said the right words there, Assistant Secretary, managing expectations. I mean, I was on an earlier session, and the question was really, so Raj, when do you think the autonomous handless driving completely autonomous vehicles, are they going to be here next year? Well, the fact is, human mind is an amazing thing. To have a machine to do what a mind can do, probably is going to take some time, especially in a safe environment, right? So most of the testing that is being done today is in a very controlled environment. A lot of applications which we are taking up are very infrastructure focused. And without good partnerships, the question about challenge, one of the challenges I think is having those strong linkages between the automotive industry, between the consulting industry and public agencies is going to be key, because we all need to share information, we all need to share technology, we all need to have our right expectations at the end of the day. I think the second challenge is resources. I mean, as public agencies begin to embark on more and more of these technology initiatives, there's going to be a widening gap between what we know and what we should be knowing to make this effective and really implementation worthy. So building that resource base, and one of the reasons why Florida DOT is so keen to advance training, sessions like these, talk more about these, communicate on what are doable and not doable. Sometimes folks say funding is a challenge, but quite frankly, funding I think is really secondary. There's other things we can do with the available funding. And last point, public agencies are always providing great service to the motoring public and all road users. And the more technology we add, we need to start thinking about operating and maintaining these systems. And that means it's not only resources, but also a vision on what we should be doing. And fortunately, we have that great vision from the leadership at FDOT in all our public agencies, Miami, with Carlos and the rest of the team. So I think a vision, forward-looking, getting ready for the unexpected is going to be the key for integrating ACES into the mainstream.
Go ahead, Carlos.
No, I was going to say that was an excellent point. And I was going to add, right, while funding might be a challenge, we also need to look at the other side. The cost of operations can reduce, right? There's a potential for that to be reduced. And then now is a really interesting approach on how we use the money that we have more efficiently. And ultimately, that particular cost of operation reduction can be translated into a lower cost of access transportation for someone without the means to access that. So I think that, to me, it is something that I want to explore. And as we continue to talk about electrification and all this in terms of the also shared spaces, electric bikes have a lot to basically support or provide to this conversation too. And I'm seeing that more and more taking off the nation and around the world. And I would like to see some of that kind of happening more in our community as well.
Yeah, and I would just add, as Raj said, that we're here to serve the public. A big barrier will be the public's trust with their personal data, right? Like a lot of this requires us to have data, aggregate it, but make sure it's anonymous. And can the public trust us to do that is very important for us to provide these options.
Yeah, I was interesting. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was on trucking, and it just sort of highlighted to me, because we talk about each one of these, and every industry is a little different. How long is it going to take to sort of, as the current fleets in different industries sort of move out, and in personal vehicles too, how long they're on the road. I was surprised when to learn that trucked, that's operated in a long haul trucking will only last 3 years. Well, transit will run their 40-foot buses for 13 years, and we, a vehicle you and I buy today might be on the road for 15 to 18 years. So it's sort of different in each industry. And think about, where the opportunities are, where that turnover could be. It's kind of fascinating to me. I had a question from the Sella that I think got maybe removed, but I was afraid that I wasn't sure how we would answer it. It was questions, how we utilizing these innovations and new technologies on, and she put in the sons and daughters of MCORS. I don't know if I really want to focus on MCORS, but it's kind of interesting to think about how do we think about these emerging mobility solutions when we plan for the quarters of the future. And it's something that, I think has challenged us a little bit when we think about a new mobility program. It's one of the things that, we're kind of debating internally. What does a new mobility program really look like? And part of the conversation has been, how do we really plan for the quarters of the future? So each one of these pieces that are in this conversation today, I think are important for that. So we'll challenge how we think about long-range planning for sure. Had a couple of other maybe sort of specific questions. There is clearly a little bit of a concern about that equity question still out there. I think about people without phones, or I heard that a couple times. So I know you addressed that, Carlos, but clearly that's on folks' minds. When we talk about transit, Carlos, and do you see your peer agencies thinking differently about their role now? Are they, we kind of hear this, a transit agency is going to become a mobility manager, which it kind of has its own sort of term of art in the transit space, or maybe it's more of a mobility integrator. Is that in the industry? Are you guys really thinking about changing the role of transit agencies a little bit?
Yeah, so the conversation is, if you go back in what is the mission and vision for the transit agencies, right? And ultimately it being to provide public transportation services to the community, and in more detail and sometimes more elaborated about access to opportunities and all the different components. So what's happening right now is that there's been a new emergence of new mobility solutions that can show a better way to serve some particular trips. And I just want to be clear, there is no substitute for a well-run fixed route bus or rail where we move a lot of people in the same direction at the same time. But for some other cases, when we have a more spread out or other components that you don't have those trips, there's other solutions to come in place. So to me is, these new mobility solutions are coming in and showing that they can do something better for the particular trips that we can with a fixed route. And as we become, like Jennifer mentioned, more accustomed, more willing to participate in this conversation, I see that happening. Why? There's no secret, there's no transit agency that makes money across the world, but it doesn't mean that we need to waste it. And I think because not our money is the money from the community as a whole, right? So to me is, let us work together and find the best way to serve the community with the limited funding that we have. And you start seeing that a lot across the nation in the state of Florida with on-demand transportation services, with on-demand transit, with partnership with micro-mobility. Bike share has been here for years, and we have agencies working on that. So I'm optimistic about the direction we're moving forward, and I think this type of partnership and conversation can help do more.
I've got a couple of questions specific to how we fund electric vehicle infrastructure. So Jennifer, you want to talk about sort of where that conversation is right now? I think it's one that's evolving.
It is certainly evolving. There's no one funding source. I think the market demand drives where the service providers are already installing charging infrastructure. And as a state, we want to make sure that we fill in the gaps. And one of the ways we can do that is partner with the utilities. That's one of the reasons why they're doing utility pilot projects with the Public Service Commission, because they're very well positioned to install charging infrastructure in those rural areas or other areas that the private sector isn't necessarily seeing a return on investment. So there's no one funding. It's working together with our partners and making sure we maximize the use of the tools that we have available to us.
We got a few minutes still, and I'm going to keep jumping around. One of the issues I know, Raj, that was kind of challenged a lot of folks in the last couple of years was, as we're looking to experiment some of the transit agencies with some of the vehicles that didn't have approvals to operate on public streets. So what's kind of the landscape from a regulatory standpoint as it relates to our ability to test connected and automated vehicles, and where do you see us going?
Thank you, Assistant Secretary. Yes, Florida, fortunately, is one of the few states in the country to have the opportunity to test in a free environment. So in that sense, Florida Statute 316.85 really allows for fully automated vehicles to operate on the state roads. Now, that said, we do have the Florida Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. So the NHTSA and the FMVSS, or the Florida Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, they actually require for vehicle testing, for the vehicles to be in a position to be tested in a safe environment. So I guess what this means is at the end of the day, anyone, whether it is the companies who do the testing or whether it is the partners who are engaged in the testing, we request them to work very closely with Florida DOT and the Florida Highway Patrol. So in other words, the legislation is there, yes. That said, coordination is always important, because if you are on the road and you do have an autonomous vehicle driving around you, most likely I think everybody would like to be aware so that everything is taken care of in a safe and safe environment. So to that extent, we request the industry to work very closely with Florida DOT and Florida Highway Patrol to do the testing. Now, with respect to the autonomous, respect to the AV shuttles, whether it's a Gainesville project or Beep in Lake Nona and others, there's a lot of testing that has been happening. NHTSA is closely watching and supporting all this testing work. Fortunately, all the big players, the Navias and the Transdev, they all understand the requirements as such. All said and done, Florida is a very forward-looking state, which is very encouraging of testing to be done. And everybody is learning the lessons so that we can incorporate them and do a better job going forward.
And I would just add to that, Raj, managed lanes are an excellent opportunity to provide an environment to test that's on our existing roads.
Absolutely, Jennifer, totally. Yeah, and I was going to connect on the social equity point of view also earlier, Jennifer. You spot on with that.
Got a good question here that I think is a little, it's worded a little differently, but maybe not along the same lines of what Sela asked earlier. There's a lot of conversation centers around policy strategies and programs for facilitating and supporting mobility opportunities of and for people. The question is, are strategies and infrastructure planning to support goods movement, commercial vehicle operations also integrated into our overall mobility plan? So it's policies and programs around moving people versus that long-range planning that also incorporates freight mobility.
Yeah, you may take that, Assistant Secretary.
Why don't you take a shot at it, and I'll see if I can enhance it anyway.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, Andy, great question. I've known Andy Munoz for a long time. Absolutely. In fact, Andy, all of the efforts that we have are very focused on commercial vehicle operations, freight focus, because there's a traffic incident management angle to that as well. We work towards programs that are context sensitive and to the satisfaction of the local entities. Now, certain entities, local agencies would like to have transit in their backyard. Others may prefer some other mode, right? So we have to be very aware of their needs. I-75 frame is a good example where you look at the project, the commercial vehicle operations, the freight, they're all integrated into the project itself. Long story short, you can integrate the truck parking availability systems and so many other applications the department has. I think in summary, Andy, yes, it's just not a plan, but it's an implementation process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There was a question earlier that I think got answered offline related to legislation that authorized automated sort of that personal delivery devices, sort of that, I guess the neuro, I think it is, vehicles are, you know, or something along those lines. I think there's a host of different ones out there, but that are geared towards that personal last mile, low speed, automated delivery. You know, there's just a lot happening out there. It's kind of intriguing to watch, and it may really challenge us to rethink our infrastructure and how do we enhance mobility of people and goods and do it in a safe way. So will be interesting to see those kind of things roll out and how the infrastructure can handle it and how we have to respond or be prepared to respond. Because a lot of times the technology seems to be moving faster than our planning process. And it's something that I think, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that, like how from a planning perspective, we're planning on, long range plans on 20-year horizons and we like to have certainty around our work program and plan the dollars out. And the world's changing so fast and these disruptions are happening at a pace that I think challenges us from a planning perspective. Do you guys have any thoughts about how we can approach that?
Yeah, so no, you're on point. Not only this technology is coming in faster than our long range planning, it's coming in faster than our construction plans, right? Or even once when we have an idea and just go into construction. So one of the things that I often kind of call out is, we get visited by technology companies and providers from around the world with ideas, right? And it's one of the things that I realize is the fact that they're all great ideas and they come to us and I fall in love with each one of them. But then the worst thing that can happen happens. And I look at them and say, I just don't need it right now. Right. So, and I say that because to me, and Brad, to your point is, instead of trying to align our planning towards what's coming, I think we need to have people design solutions to our needs, right? And I think that's a core component of our long-range transportation plan that we need to highlight. Forget about a road here, a road there, 6-lane, or transit here. What is our need? We want to connect here. We want to provide services there. That is a very vocal way to make sure technologies come in and participate on that. And on that note, you also mentioned about the community. We cannot continue to do some of this kind of planning, behind the computer. There's a lot of conversation that we need to have with the community and the users as a whole. And right now, we do have a grant from the Knight Foundation. We're working with San Jose, Detroit, and Pittsburgh, and deploying community liaisons in Miami-Dade County to be center the conversation with autonomous vehicle technology. But because AV is not there yet, we're going to start with the first and last mile deliveries that you mentioned, right? We already have a partnership with KiwiBot, which is a cyber delivery bot on it. And to us is, we have all the quantitative analysis on it. Now let's put people next to it and get the qualitative component and then be able to voice that rather loud so people are start addressing the needs that we have.
All right. Well, we are approaching the end of our session here, and this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate Carlos and Jennifer and Raj and Brady for this discussion today, and I hope folks have found it valuable. We had a good participation today, and we got some great questions. I do think, as we look forward, we're going to be challenged on how we plan, how we manage risk, and how we engage in partnerships to advance these. So again, appreciate that. If you guys have any final words for us,